5.3d, we're going to talk about finding the probability that an event occurs using a two-way table. Now, the first thing I need to talk about is conditional probability. What conditional probability is the probability that one event happens given that another event is already known to have happened. The notation for that would be the probability, for example, that event B happens given that event A has happened. How you would see that written is like this. This means the probability of B given, so right here that straight line is the vocab word given, event A has happened. The easiest way to explain what conditional probability is, it's really just using a two-way table, and instead of finding probability of all the data, you just look at a subgroup. Maybe you just look at the column of data or a row of data. That's all it really is. So let's look at this example. Again, we're back to the homeowners and if you're a high school graduate or not. If we know that a person owns a home, so I'm just going to stop right there. If we know a person owns a home, what are we looking at? Where they just told me right here, we're looking at just the homeowners. So it's a subset at the table. Question is, what's the probability a person's a high school graduate? So of the people that own a home, what's the probability you're a high school grad? It's right there. The answer is going to be 221 over 340. Let me show you how that's written using this conditional probability. So we would write it as something like this. What is the probability a person is a high school graduate given that the person owns a home? Now we did that in the table and we said the answer would be 221 over 340, which is approximately 65%. Okay, let's look at the next question. If we know that a person is a high school graduate, what's the probability the person owns a home? What subgroup am I looking at? Well, if we know the person's a high school graduate, that is my group. That's the conditional statement we're looking at, and I want to know if they own a home, so here I'm looking at that value. So let me show you how this one would be written out. The formula would be the probability a person owns a home given the person's a high school graduate. And what I would do for that calculation is just going to be 221 over the 310. So it's a similar type of calculation, but in this case we're looking at the column and not the row. Let's check your understanding on this conditional probability and do another example. Here we have students at the University of New Harmony received 10,000 course grades last summer. The two-way table breaks these grades down by liberal arts, engineering, and physical science, and health and human services, so the three schools, and then the grades, an A, B, or below a B. And I've already done the totals. There's 6,300 liberal arts, 1,600 engineering, 2,100 health and services. There were 3,392 A's, 2,952 B's, 3,656 below a B, and that gives us a total of 10,000 students. Now on here's what they want us to find. Event E, in this case, they're calling event E, the grade comes from the EPS school, so the engineering and physical science. In L, the grade is lower than a B. Well, first question here, they want to know, find the probability that L. Find the probability that a grade is lower than a B. So, is this a conditional probability? No, this is just a standard probability. All we have to do for this one, the probability that the grade is below a B, in this case, is the 3,656 over the 10,000 students. That is the probability answer. Okay, interpret this in context. Fine. I'm going to say that 36.56% of grades are lower than a B in the long run. Okay, number 2. Find the probability of E given L and find the probability of L given E. Which of these conditional probabilities tells you whether the college EPS students tend to earn grades lower than students in liberal art and social science? Let's do the first part. What is the probability of E given L? So let's just talk about that. The probability of the grade coming from the EPS school given that the grade was lower than a B. Well, given that the grade was lower than the B is the group I'm looking at. So the subgroup are all of these students. Now, again, the probability that you came from the EPS school given your grades lower than a B. Well, if you came from the EPS school given your grades lower than a B, there was 800 of you. So this is 800 over 3656, which is going to be about 0.219. Okay, let's switch gears. What if I wanted to know this one? The probability your grade is lower than a B given you came from the EPS school. Okay, well here I came from that EPS school, so that's the group I'm looking at. I'm looking at all 1,600 of you, so it's 1,600. I want to know the probability that you actually got a grade lower than a B. And in this case, we are talking about, again, the 800 there. So I'm going to do 800 over 1,600, and that's going to give me 50%. Now, two conditional probabilities, one's with a row, one's with a column. Which of these conditional probabilities tells you whether the college's engineering students tend to earn lower grades than the students in liberal arts and social studies? So if you take a look at this, the probability that's going to help me understand that is the second one. Because if I can compute from the engineering school what percent have lower than Bs, I could compute for the liberal arts their percent, and I could compute for the human services their percent, and that could tell me which school tends to have the lower grades.